Siege says, does he have a face? He's got his feet back and lost his face. Yeah, they didn't really draw his face much either in this. But let's be honest, the sheer number of stuff that they've screwed up so far, that's kind of... DPS says, everyone treats low-class workers like shit. Well, I can tell you this. The way that leftists in particular treat people that just do minimum wage work is beyond obscene. Some of the shit that I've seen them do. In person, for the record. I've seen them do shit in person that is completely beyond the pale. So
that is unsurprising.
Yeah. I mean, the people who have to constantly virtue signal, it turns out, have absolutely zero virtues whatsoever and are just ontologically evil scumbags. Who would have seen that coming?
No one, apparently.
Anyways, Yokai says, leftist, if you're not the head of the collective, aka corporations, you're not a living being. Yeah. DPS says he barely has a face on the cover at Siege. And Siege says, I wish I could make a joke about every panel, but I can't type fast enough. DPS says, the right always assume low-class workers are in this position because of some sort of personal failure. Not necessarily. I mean, there are cases where that is true, but the far-left position is the... But yeah, I kid you not, the far-left position, the way they treat them is actively worse, right? I've not seen a rhinoid try to get a worker fired, a cart pusher fired, because of how they pulled the rope, when they're pulling shopping carts. I have, however, unironically seen leftists say things like, why are you pulling that cart with the rope like you're a slave? You know, trying to get a cart pusher canceled because of how they're pulling a fucking rope. I have seen that firsthand.
And why doesn't that surprise me?
It doesn't surprise you for a reason. It's because anyone who's had to deal with leftists know exactly how they tend to be.
Yes, I do.
DPS says,
when you have some of them in your family, you see a lot of shit.
DPS says, I hate this mentality of being able to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Absolutely sickening. Well, I mean, I would actually argue that there is something to be said positive about that, right? Because what is the implication of being able to pull yourself up by your bootstraps? It shows that you actually have actual agency, right? It shows that you're not just a mindless automaton. It's that you're not just some helpless sack of flesh, which is what the far left think when they think of poor people.
Yeah, because why not?
Let's see. Winter's King says, having been a worker at Dairy Queen in the past, we would literally have to take turns dealing with leftists, rainbow flag button wearers, because they were the worst and no one wanted to serve them. Yeah, I get that. Yokai says, grunts are the backbone of society and leftists only care about fronts, not backbones. Siege says, the leftist position is the reason they are poor, and that's why most people who have worked in retail note this. DPS says, I kind of like their tactics, power above all, and the ability to abuse it is so desirable. Fuck agency, it's a lie. Is it really, though? Is it really, though? Yeah, you can have a shit life. Yes, you can have every disadvantage thrown against you, and you still can ultimately come out ahead.
You just need a lot of effort and skill.
Hell, look at me. I've had to deal with YouTube trying to demonetize my channel for a year and a half, and I was actually able to take on YouTube and get my monetization back. Me, an ordinary guy, took on YouTube and got my monetization back. I fucking won that.
I mean,
yes, agency is a thing.
It is not exactly hard to win against these people. It is just tiring because they try until they cannot anymore.
DPS says nothing we can do except what we're ordered to and what opportunities are handed to us. I've never had a choice about anything that matters in my life. And luck and handouts are all that matter. Yeah, handouts actively make things worse, if you ask me. Or at least they can. And I will explain my position here real quick. Here's the thing about handouts. There is one advantage that if you're a working class Joe, you have over the rich people. And it's the fact that you've had to actually earn your shit for a living. If you've never had to work a day in your life because you had everything handed to you, then that is a significant disadvantage. That is a disadvantage that will make you weak. That's why good times create weak men, right? So that's why, ultimately, when the hard times become a thing again, who is it that ultimately comes up but your average Joe that ends up becoming the new rich folk because of that? DPS says handouts are the only way to advance. Handouts are... Trying to make handouts a thing as a policy, if you ask me, has done more damage to anyone who has to work for a living because it takes away the one advantage you have, that being you actually have to earn your shit for a living and you're used to what it's like.
To be honest, if something serious happens now, and we have to depend on the people that were given handouts, we'll be screwed as a species.
That is true. Siege says correct. DPS says everything. Working hard isn't something to be praised. Yeah, it absolutely is. It absolutely is. It is a massive advantage when it comes to being able to make a living. It is a massive advantage in being able to advance. That's why the rags to rich story is always something that deserves nothing but praise, because it's the idea that your average regular Joe can start from nothing and basically conquer his own existence, really.
I mean, you have only to look at this comic, ironically enough. Look at how hard these people have worked. This is going to end at some point, and no one is going to ever hire these people again.
DPS says...
This is something that is going to last for however long this bullshit is going to be alive, and then it is gone. Handouts don't work.
Yeah, they don't. Like, here's another example. The U.S. education system spends more per student than any other country on the entire planet. Are you going to argue that the handouts and the government aid and all of that makes the U.S. government's education system better than everywhere else in the world?
No.
Exactly! DPS says rags to riches story should be absolutely demonized. It's an opiate for... No, what is an opiate for the masses is the handouts. It's easy to beg for money. It's easy to just sit on your ass and take drugs all day. It's easy to do a lot of shit like that.
If you take the easy path, the moment that you have to take the hard one, you are done.
DPS says the students are the problem, not the schools. Not sure I agree with that. I mean, you could argue that there are bad students. I would counter by saying that a good teacher can mold a bad student into a good one. Part of the problem is the education staff in the U.S. these days is admittedly not very good. Like, here's the thing. The teachers, you have to remember, come from, I think it's the bottom 3% of college graduates in the U.S. Compare this to, say, countries like Finland, where they're in the top 10% instead. In my high school, there was teachers that were high school teachers for history that couldn't tell you which countries fought on which side in World War I. To the tune that I was actively correcting them, and they were telling me that I should get a scholarship, or I should basically graduate college with a degree in history before I could actually counter them. They were literally making the argument that because they had the piece of paper that arbitrarily said that they sucked off someone's dick hard enough, that they magically know more about history than everyone else. When they can't even get the name of the right country, when they couldn't even tell you which countries were fighting on which sides in World War I.
having a paper that says you are good at something doesn't mean that you are good at something. Just means you have a fucking paper. I mean,
DPS says...
I remember one of the best teachers I ever had, and it was an English teacher. Ironically, because they are usually horrible in Spain. And you know what? The guy was one of the last of his kind. If one of the students was harassing or screwing around or doing everything he was not supposed to do, bam, hit on the head. A lot of people complain. A lot of the students I went with went from being assholes to straight and active students that did not want to mess around, because that guy knew how to be a teacher. He was slightly violent, but he knew how to talk and how to act. Teachers nowadays don't. And I know that a lot of people are going to say that is not a good teacher if he has to hit a student. But have you seen some of the students that there are in schools nowadays?
Yes,
the violence they bring and how uppity they are.
I've seen
there is no discipline anymore.
Basically, if I had to summarize this entire situation, I'd say that socialism makes everything fucking worse. The socialists deserve to be demonized as the scourge of the working class that they are. And make no mistake, there's a reason why a lot of working class Joes fucking hate socialists. Because people who actually work for a living, a lot of them tend to actually know what the hell's going on. We're at the stage now, right, where I'd say we're starting to get to the stage now where being a normie is actually a increasing rarity. Because to be a normie, you basically have to ignore every single piece of media that has come out in the last 2 decades. You have to ignore You have to ignore the news agencies completely. DPS says, who said anything about socialism? Well, how about this? The idea that you need handouts because you think that the working class are inferior subhumans in your mind, DPS, to the point that you don't even think they have basic autonomy. How about that? The collectivist mindset that a person would have to view the people who are working class as subhuman automatons that don't actually have basic agency. That's a good example.
I mean, if you advocate for living off handouts, that means that you think that people cannot work to make a living. Sometimes it is a lot of hard work. Sometimes it might not pay as much as you want. But if you advocate for handouts, you mean that that person doesn't have to work or try.
DPS says autonomy requires money. Autonomy requires money. Actually, no. I had to actually be living in a tent for a while. I can fucking tell you for a fact that you can be autonomous without it if it really came down to it. What you require is knowledge, and knowledge is not useless. It's qualifications without knowledge that is actually useless, because you prove that you can't actually do the job if you don't have the knowledge. You're left like these artists and writers here that don't know what the hell they're doing, making an absolute embarrassment of themselves and destroying the Star Wars lore.
You know, aren't we talking about Homer Simpson here? Someone that has technically been credited with the ability to maintain or at least keep safe a nuclear power plant, but has none of the knowledge to do so. In real life, that will not end well.
DPS says, we can't make a worthwhile living just by working. What do you think it is when an artist creates pieces of art that lives on long after his death? Do you not think that's work? Because I think it is.
Well, it is.
DPS says, qualifications without knowledge allow you to scrape by and make money. Yeah, but is really anyone really going to give a shit about you after you're dead and gone? If that's your merit.
No, not really.
You're going to be forgotten, or at the very best, you're going to be a lesson to everyone else on what not to do.
I mean, if you are lucky, and that is not really good luck in this case, you are going to be living forever in the midst of people by telling them, don't be like this idiot. He fucked up for everyone else.
DPS also says, knowledge without qualifications just leave you resentful of the world around you. Actually, no. You want to know the people who tend to be the most... like I said, one of the demographics that happen to be absolutely resentful are the college professor types and whatnot, the people in education. Short Fat Otaku's actually been talking about this himself from his own personal experience, how these education professors and whatnot are extremely bitter at the world because they expect to just be handed everything because of their qualifications. Despite the fact that they don't, a lot of these people just that are bitter just don't put any effort in. Don't actually work or actually do the bit necessary to gain the knowledge to be able to do a good job.
Why try? If they just want handouts?
Yeah, I know. DPS says, artists are social leeches who can only be successful with lottery winning luck. No, the people who are the leeches are the socialist propagandists demanding that everyone needs a handout because these socialist propagandists think that the working class are literally subhuman. I actually respect the working class. Luck and connections are everything. Tell that to the Romanovs in Tsarist Russia, who got their brains blown out.
Well, they had a lot of connections, that's for sure.
They ended up getting most of their connections all over the walls.
And again, he's right. Look is everything because they did not have any. But seriously, this is getting far too heavy.
DPS says because not being paid what we're worth totally means... Yeah, you literally made the argument that you think that working class people do not have agency. You literally made the argument that they are not capable of handling their own lives in any way whatsoever. You made the argument that I have no control over my life, right? You ended up proving my point, DPS, that you think that the working class are subhuman. That is what your position is.
Well, will it not be the opposite if you live with handouts? I mean, the moment you don't have them, you are screwed. You absolutely have no control after that.
DPS says not having agency means we're... I mean, that is one of the things that makes a human being is agency. Hell, it's something that even animals have, right? Like, a dog can have its own agency to some degree. And you're saying that the working class don't even have that. Alright? That is absolutely... We can't handle our lives because... Yeah, you were given the opportunity. You just wasted it, DPS, because you're a shit person. I don't know what more to tell you on that. Right? You've been... And also he says, likewise, those leading the revolution have money connections. Right, so when Joseph Stalin grew up in an abusive household, was constantly on the run from the law, and constantly got arrested time and time again, that was him having connections and being lucky, wasn't it? I don't like Joseph Stalin. I think he was a fucking piece of shit. I will say, though, that he did at least come from a working Joe background, if nothing else.
I mean, he was not exactly a good person, but he worked towards what he wanted to achieve.
DPS says...
We didn't like what he wanted to achieve, but he tried.
Yeah. Yokai says, is this DPS guy actually a human? Because the comments sound like a chat bot. DPS says, oh, you mean the same way that as soon as you don't have a job? Again, right? There was a time where I was living in a fucking tent, right? And I've come a long way from there. I have built my own work. Here's the thing. Here's the thing that socialists don't seem to get is that by their own definition, if you have a lemonade stand, you're in fact bourgeoisie because you run a business. You own means of production. If you have a 3D printer, you can make models out of that, from that. Therefore, you're not a proletariat, you're bourgeoisie. Hell, if you own a house, you can rent a room in that house, meaning that you're not proletariat, you're bourgeoisie. The technical term is petty, but the point is, by the socialist definition of what a bourgeoisie and a proletariat is, the proletariat do not fucking exist anymore. You could argue it was a myth that they existed in the first fucking place, because you could always start your own business up. You could mow your own lawn, start mowing lawns, and make money that way. There have been people that have become millionaires, just got their start mowing lawns, and then made a business out of it.
You need a lot of effort to get to that point.
Almost like you could call it hard work.
Of course. If you don't want to work hard or put the effort, that is on you.
Winner's King says, DPS, you can have a job without being screwed. DPS says, most businesses are doomed for failure.
Well, that is defeatist.
Ah, yes, so most people failed, therefore you should never try in the first place. Well, leave aside the fact that it used to be that the majority of people were self-employed, say, back in the 19th century in the U.S., for example. But the fact that businesses tend to fail means you should never try in the first place. We'll also leave aside the fact that you can always make a new business when the last one failed. I know people who are in the restaurant business, and this is their third or so time getting into it. And because they've kept doing it, they've still got a living, right? Sometimes it is a matter of try again. DPS says you're basically justifying gambling. Yeah, and you're justifying being a fucking failure, right? That's the thing.
I think you are wrong on that. Because to fail, you have to try. He's asking not to try.
I'd say that refusing to try is an automatic failure anyways.
Well, yes. You are not wrong there.
Siege says, after becoming a partner in another business earlier this year doesn't pay the bills yet, but getting there. Yep. By socialist definition, all farmers are bourgeois. Yes, they are. That is absolutely true. Yeah.
I mean,
to be
to speak about what Sid you said, my mother a long time ago bought herself a small shop, and she sold things to children. You know, the usual gum and other sugary treats. The usual corner store. You know, it did not give money at first. It was hard, and it did not go anywhere because we have to sell at some point. But she tried. She made quite a lot of money at the time. And she was happy. You have to try and see if it works or not. If you don't try, why are you complaining? You are not attempting to do anything.
All right, DPS says, being a failure is the state of the vast majority of people, and accepting that needs to be normalized.
No.
How about fuck you, DPS? No, fuck that nonsense. I mean, imagine saying, seriously.
The idea that you have to accept that you are a failure without even trying is...
All right, DPS, here's the thing. Okay, DPS, if you want to normalize being accepted as a failure, if you want handouts in the form of free food, free clothes, free housing, and free healthcare, I have just the fucking place for you in the United States right now. It is a place that is your utopia. It will grant you all of that and more. It will also grant you security. You want to know what that place is called? Prison.
Yes, it was either that or, well, maybe not California anymore. Well, could you not
DPS
go to
says,
New York?
DPS says, if I try, I'll just be blamed for my failure, even if it was outside my control. I'll be worse off. Will you really, though? Because here's the thing, right? Like I said, I know people who this is their third try in the restaurant business. I wouldn't actually call them worse off for it. They actually have their own business up and running, and it's actually doing reasonably well from what I've seen. And yeah, sometimes experience is a very useful tool, even if you don't really win. As the old saying goes, there is one lesson in victory and 1,000 in defeat. If you take on board what worked and what didn't, then you could, in the next time, make a better showing of it.
Yeah,
DPS says, prison is on the table of things if shit gets bad enough for me. DPS, why are you calling prison bad? It's guaranteeing everything you want. It's your personal utopia. You're getting free healthcare, free food, free housing, free clothes. You're getting security in as well. Hell, you don't even have to freeze because the weather's always the same in there.
Hell, if you want, you can learn shit in prison too.
Technically, yes. Yes, you can. Not necessarily good things, but hey, if you're the sort of person that's resolved to wanting to normalize failure, well...
Look,
DPS says, I also want comfort. DPS says, I also want comfort. DPS, don't you know comfort is subjective? I mean, you're guaranteed to have the same weather all year round while you're inside. You don't have to you don't have to lift a single finger for the rest of your life. You get fed, you get your housing, you get health care. And you're guaranteed these things. You won't have to worry about them anymore. Isn't that what socialists think of when they think of comfort?
Oh my god.
DPS says, and a free sleeping schedule. Bro, in prison, the inmates tend to sleep till 3 fucking p.m. in the afternoon. DPS says, seriously, staying awake as a full day is brutal.
Oh god. This is becoming beyond ridiculous.
Oh, the jokes are writing themselves. Yokai says max security. That's another thing, by the way. If you knew anything about how prisons are actually run and whatnot, turns out quality food, food that the inmates will actually be happy with, is a way to keep them docile. As is shit like TV, cell phones, and tablets. And yes, they have all of those in prison, for the record. Siege says, it's wild that I feel more helpful here in South Africa. This are funny. Alright. This broke my grammar. Okay. I think we are finally done with that. I can actually get on with the comic. Honestly, maybe it's just me, but I found that deviation to be way more entertaining than the actual comic itself.
It was. I mean, the comic is going to just get worse. This conversation could go anywhere. The comic is going to go downhill.
Alright, let's continue.